Healthy Rebel Radio is sponsored by the Healthy Rebel app. 300 plus secretly healthy, delicious, mouth-watering dessert and treat recipes made with all-natural, whole food ingredients. Now available for download on the App Store and Google Play. Find out more details at healthyrebel.com.
Welcome to Healthy Rebel Radio. I'm your host, Dr. David Dazzler. I'm here with my Damie Health Healthy Rebel co-founder, Amy Lane. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a few quick health and wellness stories to review today. We've got some scandal going on. Controversy.
Scandal?
Scandal.
Controversy?
Controversy. And I feel like I'm having deja vu for some reason about the first one we're going to talk about. But you'll have to let me know if I've said this to you before. I don't think I've said it on the show. But I read a story this morning that I feel like it's the first time I've heard it.
Wow, this is such a lead up. I can barely take it.
I know. It's because of the controversy.
Okay.
Controversy.
All right. I'm not involved, right?
No, you're not involved.
Okay,
no.
Great.
It's this idea we've been talking about the correlation between gut bacteria and obesity.
Oh, okay.
Well, some theorists, and this is coming from the journal Nature, which is a really well-respected publication. They're taking some of this research I've been talking about the last couple weeks about your microbiome and how changes in gut bacteria potentially are correlated with... Well, they are correlated. We've seen that in large trials, but potentially could be one of the causes of obesity.
Okay.
What they're saying is obesity could be contagious. Because some of these...
Not environmentally contagious. I do believe environmentally contagious, but you're saying...
I'm saying physically environmentally contagious, not just genetics. So
I'm not talking about genetics. I'm talking about environmental contagion, like mental...
Changing your life.
I'm talking about mental atmosphere contagion.
Right. You're talking about...
You know when you're in like a crowd and you pick up the vibe?
Oh, yeah.
Like if you grow up in a house where emotional eating or abusive food is the norm, you catch that. That's what I think.
Right. And what the research is saying is that some of these bad bacteria, they're transferable via spores in the air.
No.
So not only could you be catching the vibe of obesity, but you also could be catching bad bacteria from your family members, which then promote obesity.
This is controversy. So this is a whole nother level of you are who you hang with.
So true.
I mean, we use that saying all the time. You have to be very careful who you spend time with. Because you are who you hang with. Definitely.
Always something to keep on your radar.
Wow.
But this is a whole nother story because we have, billions and billions of good bacteria and bad bacteria in our bodies. But these ones, they're saying specifically, it seems like they're transferable.
I don't know.
In the air.
I don't know.
And, currently we just have a correlation with obesity. What they found is that people who have a greater diversity of good bacteria tend to be leaner than the people who have very singular... fewer amounts of good bacterial strains. But then if you look on the bad side of bacteria, these bad ones, they seem to be able to, some of them, fly through the air and then subsequently infect the other person's digestive tract and potentially cause obesity. It's interesting.
It's really interesting.
This is coming from the journal Nature. This is a serious journal. This is a serious article.
I'm not taking it lightly.
Have I said this to you before?
No, we've talked more about mental atmospheres. Like about mental, emotional, like that emotions are contagious. Which I think anyone, especially women, can relate to. We can walk into a room and we can be like, we feel what's going on before things are even said. That type of thing. That's why it's so important to do whatever you consider, you don't even have to call it your spiritual practice, whatever your grounding practice is every single day before you head out through the day. That's why I talk about it's so important, because you don't want to absorb everybody's stuff. But no, we've never talked about this level. I think it's really interesting and we should keep looking into it.
Definitely. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is... The person's named Dr. Trevor Lawley, who he led the study at the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute. He says conditions like obesity, inflammatory bowel disease, which includes Crohn's and colitis, can be passed on. And it's commonly thought that Crohn's and colitis are completely genetic. because we see it in people's families so frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that I think there are definitely diseases that are caused by an immune. There are definitely diseases that are caused by an imbalance in microbiota. If you look at something like inflammatory bowel disease or obesity, that's a possibility. People who live in the same house share a similar microbiome, and genetics only really account for 7 to 13% of the risk for these inflammatory bowel diseases.
Well, it's a very interesting conversation.
It is. Just another reason to take care of your gut bacteria.
But how can they tell the difference between if it's an environmental difference? If it's an environmental contagion, like what you're all exposed to, how you're all living, or if it's actually... How do they know?
Because you start to look at the differences. You start to take stool samples and culture them, and you see. Okay.
Did they do this? Is this what they're saying?
They're
definitively.
I can't remember exactly what they're doing. But I believe they're looking at the study we talked about a few days ago. That was stool cultures of like 1,000 people, and even if you live in the same household, if someone has a different set of bacteria, they could potentially be leaner. So they're saying like people in the same household with the same microbiome.
Okay, I understand now.
It's like wait a minute, they have a very similar microbiome and they both have the same body type. Something's happening here. Either they're eating the same foods like we talked about last week, I believe. The difference between drinking water and drinking pop like Coke or Pepsi. Coke or Pepsi can wipe out your good bacteria.
Right.
So if someone in the house is having a different lifestyle in that sense, they're going to have a different microbiome. And it might just not be the high fructose corn syrup in the actual, pop. It might be that they have different bacteria now and they have ones that promote obesity. Because, what we see is some are promoting inflammation. Strange.
But still not an excuse to be a victim.
Well, no. I mean, the healthier lifestyle you have, we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks as well. The healthier lifestyle you have, you make the proper choices with food, fluids, and stress reduction. You have a more diverse microbiome.
And to that note, we both have lived in environments where we weren't in control of the food that was being brought in, and we didn't want to eat the same as the people we were living with. We've both had to make those changes, so it is possible. It's not easy, but it's not hard.
No, I mean, sometimes you just have to
do it.
You just have to do it, especially in this case. And sometimes, well, in this situation, it can be as simple as, replacing your good bacteria, taking a probiotic, a good one.
Yeah, but I don't care how much probiotic you take. If you're not eating healthy, it doesn't matter. If you're taking if you're taking a probiotic and then you're chugging down Diet Coke and eating McDonald's,
it just kills it off.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's like anything.
Yeah.
It's like if you go in for a 30-minute run and then you go to the Golden Corral after.
GC?
Bringing it back.
Wow, GC makes an appearance.
It was such a shocking thing to witness when we were in Florida that it often comes up in my mind.
I'm often sitting around hanging out and I think of the GC.
I think, my gosh, that's a thing.
When we went to Florida, we went to the Golden Corral and we
somewhat
could not
accidentally
believe it.
It was shocking.
That'll wipe out your microbiome.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I feel like, I used to be the queen of taking little bits of information that would keep me small, keep my ego inflamed, and keep me on the path of almost doing it right, but back into the spiral of not doing it right, so I could be a victim. So you have to be really careful with yourself when you're listening to information and not take the little bit like, oh, well, he said I could just take these probiotics and boom, I'm not going to be obese.
Sweet. Yeah. No.
It's like you have to do everything.
Oh, yeah, and if you want them to flourish, the best thing to do is to eat healthy, right? Fruits and vegetables, healthy whole grains. These are things that are going to make your microbiota flourish. So not only if you put them in, then you can actually promote the growth and the development of the microbiome. If you eat healthy and you keep stress low, right?
Yeah.
You exercise. Yeah. Because this all contributing positively. But yeah, you can't just do the one thing. You can't just pop a probiotic at night. Yeah, it's true. Well, more scandal to cover today. More controversy.
Controversy.
This is another one. A reputable place that we're getting this information from. Johns Hopkins. Okay, one of the best hospitals. They have a publication. What they're saying, this is This was demanded by patients that this study was done. This is how controversy, how much scandal we're talking today. We're talking about patients who, were suffering from mental illness, who were attending Johns Hopkins for treatment, and over, they got requests to do testing, large trials on candida.
Oh my god, I saw this.
Did you?
Continue.
It's
serious.
But
I purposely didn't read the article because I knew...
You probably figured, he's going to catch that.
Yeah, and I was going to tell you last night and I completely forgot. Okay, sorry guys. Go.
They wanted to know, is candida associated with my mental illness? Is it associated with my memory loss? Let's do a large trial. Mm-hmm. So they got thousands of people to participate in this. Mm-hmm. If you're not familiar with candida, it's a healthy bug. It's a bug that we all have in our bodies, and at some level or another, when it gets overgrown, when it takes over, it multiplies and takes more space than it should, you can get pathology. Mm. It's yeast. It's yeast infections. It's
thrush of the mouth.
Thrush of the mouth. It's all these different. It's a complex of symptoms, and you can have it in different areas. People with immune compromise.
Jock itch for men.
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no?
Yeah. It's when you have immune compromise, it shows up in some places. When you have, stress and poor diet, it can show up in others, and it's most commonly associated with yeast infections in females. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there was a demand. Let's do a trial. Let's see, is yeast infections associated with schizophrenia and bipolar? And what they found was, in men, there was a large association with candida infections, and they're doing, I should preface this, they're doing IgG testing of candida in the blood. So they're looking for immune molecules that reacted to candida. Mm. And what we know about IgG molecules is they last for about 4 days. So it doesn't give... The study doesn't give much information about because these people did not have active infections. So they were trying to do the history.
This is just cracking the door open to the conversation.
It's just cracking the door, and it's enough to continue on the conversation.
Okay.
So what they found was there was these IgG molecules, these immune complex molecules to candida, significantly more in men with schizophrenia and bipolar than in not. Okay. In women, it was about equal. It was about 30% on both sides. And that's fine.
Okay, but I have a question.
Sure,
okay,
go for it.
No, continue.
No, go for it.
I have a question. It just popped in my head. So is this something that's there, or is this a symptom of taking the medications and then wiping out your good bacteria? Like when you take an antibiotic?
Absolutely possible. We're not 100% sure of what certain medications do.
Because it could be what's first, chicken or the egg. Because
exactly.
That's came into my mind.
It depends because, some of these drugs that these people were probably on, I don't know if they standardized the study for that. They may have. Yeah. I don't know all the details. Yeah. But, in schizophrenia, some of the drugs are very serious and have some significant side effects. So it's something to consider.
Well, I know with people, just like side effects of people I've worked with that have taken some of these drugs, I know that they didn't tell me about yeast infections, but they would tell me things like about dry mouth and dry nose and dry eyes. That's so right. I'm assuming physiologically things are happening.
Oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely things are happening. And if you're familiar with candida, you know about the symptoms. Okay, we talk about yeast infections, we talk about susceptibility to fungal infections like athlete's foot and thrush and that type of thing. But usually what we're speaking of is this dysbiosis, this problem with the microbiota, and in that situation people normally complain of bloating, lack of focus, and short-term memory loss or difficulty with recall. And people think, I'm really foggy, I'm really bloated, and I'm getting these fungal infections. What's going on? And it's probably an overgrowth of bad bacteria or an overgrowth of yeast. It could be an overgrowth of bad bacteria. It could be anything. But we know that it's probably not a systemic candida infection. It's probably not systemic fungal infection. That's a very serious condition, commonly associated with immunocompromise and AIDS, HIV. However, if your immune system is wiped out or insufficient, or you're not fighting these yeast infections properly, it's very possible that you're going to be suffering from mental fatigue, lack of focus, because you're expending energy to try and fight an infection that you can't handle. right? So if you're dealing with a yeast infection, I'm not surprised if you're feeling tired.
No.
Or you can't focus.
Yeah.
Your immune system is trying to take care of one thing. You need energy for other things as well.
I gotta say, with women with yeast infections, anyone listening, though, would be like, yeah, you can't think about anything else anyway. Like,
no, it's true,
even,
right. It's so true.
It's not even...
It's so true.
You know.
And, you know, I'm more speaking of when people are dealing with bloating, memory loss, but then they're having recurrent.
Yeah.
Where their immune system is just going up and down, right? They're just busy.
Yeah.
Anyhow, in the study, okay, so men, definitely there was a statistically significant increase in people who had schizophrenia and bipolar who had been suffering from candida. Now, in women, it was about equal, but we're just talking 4 days of immune molecules. The conversation is still going. It still was more in women with schizophrenia and bipolar, but it wasn't statistically significant. But what they did find is on this memory testing. Okay, the memory testing results were crazy. People who have had experience or have had recurrent candida infections, women and men, significantly scored lower on memory recall and memory testing than those who had not. So we're talking people who are dealing with mental illness. They demanded this study. They said, is this associated, is this a cause of my mental illness?
Yeah.
Or is this a cause of my symptoms, or is there any relation at all? And they found, okay, it doesn't look like there's a causation between yeast infections and mental illness. I mean, it's still possible. We don't really know. But we do know that those who are suffering from candida infections significantly do poor on memory recall. I don't know. There's a connection here. And it opens up the conversation more to the gut-brain connection, the immune system-brain connection. When you're fighting infections, anything can happen.
Yeah, and it's what you're saying. It's like, it's just such a bigger conversation. It's like we just found out this year about B12 and, like, not just in the blood and for blood tests, it's actually in the brain. And, like, what I've always said is how I react. Like, I got in an argument with a MD online about that you can't tell me that there's not a mental connection between B12. And this was before the study came out, if you recall.
That's true.
And I argued with this person, and he was trying to say there's no difference in the blood work between pills and injection. And I was like, I'm trying to tell you, when I get it muscularly, my brain chemistry is different. And, like, I'm not a placebo person.
Right.
And that was so amazing. And then a few months later, that study came out. But
a few months? It was years later.
But the bigger conversation is, like, about what you've been talking a lot about with me lately privately about infections in brain, the connection in the lymph, because we just found out about the lymph. Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole thing. I can't.
I know.
Because it's so interesting because with myself, I can relate to that because when I get sick, I don't really get physically sick, but I get anxiety. And then I realize that I'm sick.
I know, and it's so crazy. I mean,
and I have a very, like, I don't get sick, but I have a very reactive lymphatic system.
Yes, you do.
So finding out that the lymphatic system also runs through.
Well, when you have, you know, lymphatic drainage issues, or if your immune system is flared up in one region, and it can very easily affect the brain. I mean, it's crazy.
So this is a whole nother.
I know. And if you see the news articles, I mean, where I like to get my news for this type of thing is on a site called ScienceDaily.com, and they take these articles from these reputable journals and they write little write-ups on them. But they just take usually the article title and they use that as their title. The title of this is "Yeast Infection is Linked to Mental Illness." That's what I saw.
That's what I saw, and I was like, "What?" And then I read the little.
If you read through, it's in this study it was more associated with men, but with everyone, and actually it may have been more common in women. Candida infections more common among those with memory loss.
I just find this conversation so interesting, and I think that we're going to find in the next 10 years so much more information between the connection between, like you were saying, like the immune system, the brain, the immune system, the gut, obviously. The gut and the brain.
And we are. And the good news is, as we find out more and more about this, is this can be healed. You can fix this.
And not only can it be healed, it can be healed simply.
Yes, naturally, without medications.
Like, and that's what's exciting, because there's so many of these people that, you know, have mental illnesses or have these, I don't know what you'd say, dysbiosis?
Yeah, that's right.
That are low income. And the solutions are not going to be expensive, and that makes me so excited.
Right. I mean,
because it's taking away that hamster wheel of the system, right?
Oh, it's so true.
It's actually root cause. Like, we could do some major healing of a majority of people.
As we learn more about the immune system, we're going to be treating more of the root cause. Yeah. It's going to be so incredible.
It really makes me excited.
And it's going to be all natural. It's going to just be excellent. Because, I mean, if you've been to a naturopath or you know about naturopathic medicine, you know that we treat these things often. We've been working on this for a very, very long time. And again, when you're communicating with someone about this, it's not systemic candida infection. It's not someone who has fungus ravishing their body. It's immune deficits in certain regions where they're more susceptible to yeast infections. Usually dark, moist, damp places.
Yep.
But you can find these immune molecules in the blood. So as your body reacts and tries to heal, it creates these immune molecules, and then they float around. They're called IgG.
Right.
And you can easily test them, and that's what they did. The problem is they only last for about 4 days. So if you heal up and your immune system resets, these molecules are probably going to go away. So if you really look at this study, the people who did test positive, they had recently had an infection, and they were recently dealing with it. So it's there's just more to be done. So what they're saying here next is that they'll move on to the preliminary trials of seeing if giving a mouse a yeast infection causes memory loss or causes a mental disorder. Anyhow, it's going to progress. We're going to learn more and more about it, and the future of the immune system and the gut-brain connection and the immune system-brain connection is just going to be incredible. So a little bit of controversy today. 2 reputable studies, reputable journals, giving some more information about some things we can do to
cracking the door open to a bigger conversation.
Yeah, with these correlation studies, I mean, they're not causation, but they are correlation, and we can fix them, so you can remove that corresponding lifestyle factor by healing your immune system.
It's an exciting time.
That's Healthy Rebel Radio for today. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.
See you. Thank you for listening to Healthy Rebel Radio. Please connect with us on our community pages on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram, all at the handle @DamiHealth. For weekly recipes, articles, and all our episodes straight to your inbox, join our newsletter at damihealth.com. You can find all the links discussed in today's episode in the show notes. Thank you for joining us, and see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening to Healthy Rebel Radio. Please connect with us on our community pages on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram, all at the handle @DamiHealth. For weekly recipes, articles, and all our episodes straight to your inbox, join our newsletter at damihealth.com. You can find all the links discussed in today's episode in the show notes. Thank you for joining us, and see you tomorrow.